Hey there. So I had an interesting couple of weeks. What were you doing? Hey everybody, welcome to Torah Tech Tips. I'm Rabbi David, your Torah tech guy. I'm here to give you some great tech for your great Torah. But today actually it's maybe a little more Torah for your tech. So I wanted to reflect on my high holiday experience from these past couple of weeks. We just finished Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, the Aseret Yemei Teshuvah, the 10 days of repentance. And I spent my high holidays, I did a little leading, I got to lead some family services, but the vast majority of my time was spent behind a computer screen because I was producing or managing, whatever you want to call it, the online experience and service for the participants who were attending Temple Sinai of North Dade's services. If you're interested in seeing what our services looked like, you can go to tsnd.tv. But I was basically sitting back there behind a computer. I had, on my main screen, I had vMix, which is the software that we were using to actually cut the show, to switch the service. I had Google Slides open because we use that for our lower thirds. I had my run of show, as you call it, or my Seder Tefillah, my order of service. I had my computer where I was monitoring the YouTube and the Facebook feeds. I had a Stream Deck, and I had an iPad where I was doing all the controlling of vMix from. So I don't think most people imagine, excuse me, I don't think most people imagine that sitting behind a computer screen can be a really spiritual experience. You know, the truth is that we've been asking people to do that now for quite a while. As soon as we all went online, as soon as we started offering services and spiritual experiences online, we sort of just took it for granted that it was possible to have a spiritual experience while you're online. And if that isn't already difficult enough, having a spiritual experience when you are actively 100% of the time engaging with the technology. You're pressing buttons, you're moving the mouse, you're hitting the keyboard, you're doing all of these different things. So I wanted to share with you what my experience was like and what I learned. And what I learned is that not only is it possible to be sort of the digital rabbi and still find Kavanah, still find a spiritual experience, but it may have actually even helped me to do so. So let me explain why. So, and I'll give you sort of two examples of why this worked. The first is the way we ran our services is that there were a number of different scenes that we had set up in vMix. And on my iPad, I was controlling all of those scenes, which scene we were going to go to. So were we going to go to the rabbi or the cantor or the choir or the Bima or the congregation, right? All these different scenes. And I had my list of all the different pieces of the service and what scene we were supposed to go to. At the same time, we had this Google Slides that had the liturgy on it. And some of that was full screen. Most of it was lower thirds. And so I had to also make sure the correct lower third was up. So I had to be going through the Google Slides. And when it was time to not have a lower third up, I had to turn that off and turn it on, what have you. You get the idea. What this means is that I had to pay more attention. I'm a rabbi. It's my job to pay attention to the liturgy. I had to pay more attention to the liturgy than I think I've ever done in my life. Like when I was leading the davening, when I was leading services, I'm not sure that I paid quite as much attention to the liturgy. And maybe I wasn't paying attention for the right reasons, but the fact that I had to know exactly when to switch the lower third for the liturgy, or when I had to know what had we just done, what are we doing now, what's coming up next, when I had to be thinking ahead, but also very present in what we were doing right now. I had to follow every word to make sure that the liturgy switched at the right time, to make the camera, the scene that we were going to was the right one. I was so hyper-focused on the liturgy. I feel like I read every single word of the liturgy that we did in Hebrew and English. It was really sort of wild. Now, again, to be fair and honest, I wasn't reading it for the reason I should have been reading it, right? I wasn't reading it for the sake of davening. But perhaps just as a byproduct of the work that I was doing, I had a really intense experience with the liturgy. And there would be times throughout the service when maybe we were on an extended prayer and I had a moment when I could actually pause from the switching or the changing, and something that I saw in the liturgy would pop back into my head, or something that I'm looking at right now would jump out at me and catch my attention. It was really pretty wonderful. The second thing that happened is when the rabbi was giving his Devar Torah, his sermon. We had people watching on Facebook. We had people watching on YouTube. I've talked here in the past about how I'm a fan of Zoom. I want the people that are watching to be seen. I think you can get more interaction through Zoom. But it wasn't my choice to make. They were streaming to YouTube and Facebook. I wanted the experience to be as inclusive for our participants on those platforms as possible. So the other thing that I was doing, actually, before I get to the rabbi's sermon, is that every time I saw someone make a comment on either of those platforms, I responded to them as the host, as Temple Sinai. And I used their name, John, so happy you're here. Or even if people were just writing Gamar Tov or, Shana Tova, whatever their greeting was, whatever they were writing in the chat, even if it wasn't directed toward me, I would always respond to their chats with their name, so they knew that we knew that they were there and that it mattered that they were there. If people would thank us for having the stream, I would thank them for being a part of our community. Thank you for spending your time with us. What a blessing to have you here. And then getting back to the sermon, as the rabbi was speaking, I was sort of live chatting some of the highlights from his sermons. Now, for the last of his sermons, he after the fact, he saw that I had been doing this. No one asked me to do this. He saw that I'd been doing this. He actually handed me a copy of his sermon for the last one, which, as it turns out, I think was a mistake, because for the first, whatever it was, 3 or 4 of them, I had to listen intently to every word of his sermon. And I had to listen for those pieces that I thought were the takeaways, right? What were the pieces that I'd want to jot that down on a piece of paper, right? And take that with me, or ask my partner about that later in the evening. And then those little pieces I would very quickly type out into one of the platforms in the chat. I'd send it, and then I'd copy it and post it into the other platform in the chat. And I'd say between 10 to 15 maybe highlights for each sermon. And I hope that was meaningful and helpful to the participants who were with us online. A couple people mentioned that they appreciated it. But for me, as a behind the Bima davener, it was really pretty wonderful. Because again, I was forced to really pay attention, to really focus on what the rabbi was saying and what I wanted to take away from it. I wasn't expecting either of these. I really wasn't. I was expecting I get sort of hyper-focused and like a laser beam. And so I was expecting to really focus on the technology. Now, thank goodness we didn't have any big technological mishaps. And had we, then my experience may have been very different. Everything went really smoothly. I screwed up a couple of times, but that's bound to happen. But nevertheless, I wasn't expecting to have had such a, not pleasant, I'm not interested in a pleasant experience. I'm interested in a meaningful experience, right? An easy fast, I don't want an easy fast. The whole point is that it shouldn't be easy. It should be a little hard. And I had a meaningful experience on Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur, even though I was behind the BIM, even though I was sitting at a computer screen the whole time and doing the technology. Would I choose this? I don't know. I don't think so. I think I love leading davening. I love leading services. And so I think if I, were ruler of the world, I think I would probably choose to do some of that. But if I don't have my own community to lead, this is a pretty sweet way to spend the holidays. It really was. Again, not because it was easy, not because it was fun, but because it was meaningful. I was hyper-focused on what was happening, on the words that were being said, the words that were, the Torah that was being taught. It was really very beautiful. So I'm incredibly grateful to my community for allowing me to sort of be the digital rabbi for these high holy days. I think that one of the challenges that, again, synagogues around the world are going to face after. Jerry, I'd be happy to tell you what they use. I'll just finish this one thought. Now I forgot my thought because Jerry asked a really good question. So Jerry's question is, have I ever described the equipment used in the shul? And I haven't, I don't think. So the real expert, to be honest with you, about this is going to be Cantor Norman Cohen-Fala. He set it all up. But B'kitzur, in short, they have 3 PTZ cameras, pan-tilt zoom cameras, that are all mounted from the ceiling in the back of the sanctuary. They're probably 20 times zoom. I don't know for sure, but I think that's what they are. And you'll have to forgive me, I don't know the brand. I'm not sure of the brand. 3 PTZ cameras. Those are all wired via Ethernet. So they're using NDI over Ethernet into a computer in the office, which is running vMix. vMix is the PC sort of platform for streaming and video production. They added this year actually 2 other cameras. They also have a Mevo camera, one of those little tiny Mevo cameras that is focused on the choir. And just for Yom Kippur, they added at the last minute, I want to say Avio, I don't remember the name of the camera, I'm sorry, they just added it, a camera that they put right on top of the ark looking out to the congregation. So they had 5 cameras in total, but each of those PTZ cameras had multiple shots. So one was a close-up of the rabbi, one was a little wider of the Bima, things like that. So there were actually probably in total about 13, 14, maybe 14 or 15 shots in total that we could choose from those 5 cameras. All of those were running into vMix. The audio was all running into a Behringer X32 rack mount unit, which is a beautiful unit. They did have someone there who's running the audio. I was not in charge of that. I was controlling vMix using the iPad app. There's a vMix iPad app where you click the buttons and it does the switch for you. But I also used a Stream Deck really with only 2 buttons. And I only used Stream Deck with 2 buttons because I don't really know vMix that well and I didn't know how to program it for the other things. One button was to fade from one scene to another. So the way vMix works is you have a preview window and you have a program window, and you pop something in the preview window and then you click either cut or fade to have it move to the program window. So I had one Stream Deck button that was a fade button, and the Stream Deck button right below it was an advance button for the Google Slides. The way the Google Slides were built is they're actually full-size slides with notes on the top for us and the liturgy in the lower third on the bottom. That is overlaid on top of the scene in vMix, every scene in vMix, and then we just cropped it down so that in vMix you only see the lower third. We can see the lower third and all of the notes above it, which give us the camera cue and what's coming next and things like that. And so I also had a second Stream Deck button that allowed me to advance the slide. So I basically was resting my hand on a Stream Deck with 2 buttons. The bottom one was advance. The one right above it was fade to the next scene. I had the iPad, and then I had on my computer the feeds that I could follow. So it's actually not a really complicated setup that they have. 5 cameras, 3 PTZs, and then 2, sort of small prosumer, not even really prosumer, I'd say, consumer versions. All of them running over NDI over Ethernet. So all of them are just plugged into an Ethernet cable that all runs into, they have a rack in the back where everything plugs in. That all goes into the computer, into vMix. The audio all runs separately into a Behringer X32. I like vMix. It's my go-to for productions PC, and Ecamm is go-to on Mac. Yeah, Ecamm and vMix are very different beasts. If you've used both, they are really very, very different monsters. Ecamm, I guess one could say that vMix is far more of a professional grade platform, but I tell you can do pretty much all the same stuff with Ecamm. The layout is different. There's certainly different functionality. I think vMix is probably a little more expandable. You could certainly build upon vMix a little more, but both are really, really wonderful platforms. And yes, audio is the real challenge, which is why they had a dedicated audio guy there. We recently, they, as I think a lot of places did, redid all of their systems in the past couple of years. And so they had an audio guy come in and run that. One of the benefits, we did run a number of videos throughout the holidays. One of the, I shouldn't say benefit, it actually wasn't a benefit, but it made our lives a little easier. One of the challenges that we avoided this year is that they didn't have remote participants, which again, that's not a good thing. I don't recommend that. It made our work behind the scenes easier. We do have two large screen. Oh, I didn't mention this. I apologize, Jerry. We do have two large TVs in the sanctuary that are hooked up, and we can send a program out to that. We can either send what's on my secondary screen. So if that's where I keep my Google Slides, I could just send that out there, or I can actually send the program to those screens. So if we did have a caller, a participant come in, we could send them up to those screens also. We didn't do that this year. Again, it wasn't my call. It's a shame. I think it's a missed opportunity. We did have people pre-record participation and then show those videos both in the stream and in the sanctuary as well. So for me, as the digital rabbi guy, it was a really joyful experience, a really meaningful experience for me. So if you find yourself dealing with the technology in your synagogue, in your church, in your wherever, in your mosque, don't give up hope. Don't give up hope that you can have a spiritual experience too. You can. We deserve that. Those of us who are doing this work of this spiritual and educational work in digital space, that doesn't mean that we don't also deserve, just like the rabbis, the priests, the imams who are on the pulpits deserve to pray, we also deserve those experiences, and it is possible. I'm so glad, Facebook user, I don't know your name, and I'm so sorry that your name didn't come through on Facebook. But Jerry and everyone else who's watching, I'm really glad that you're here, and thank you for allowing me to share. It was an unexpected experience for me, and it was really joyful. So, hey, by the way, just a little heads up, tomorrow at 3 o'clock Eastern on the Zoom Test Kitchen. If you go to Facebook, search for Zoom Test Kitchen. You can also access it through my website. We're going to have the developers from Zoom, of Zoom ISO, and oh, Brother Donald. That's my man right there. Hello, my friend. Oh, it is so good to see you. It is so good to see you. Brother Donald and I were getting excited. We were sharing excitement about a video I posted a couple days ago about being able to write in real time on your iPad, which is a great little app. Video Pencil, if you're interested in that. I just did that video a couple days ago. Really good to see you, my friend. But tomorrow, in the Zoom Test Kitchen, Andy Carluccio and Jonathan, whose last name I'm blanking out at the moment, I apologize, Jonathan, are both going to be on. They are going to be talking about the stable release of Zoom ISO version 2. I'm sure they'll also talk about Zoom OSC. And they are amazing. They now work at Zoom. So if you have Zoom questions, Zoom ISO questions, Zoom OSC questions, bring them. Tomorrow, it's live in Zoom. It's on Facebook. It's in YouTube. It's everywhere. More information is, I'll show you on my website. You can also just go to Facebook and go to the Zoom Test Kitchen there. I'll be hosting that, and I'm really, really excited to do that. And while you are checking that out, you'll find a link to the Zoom Test Kitchen on my video page, I believe, over at TorahTechGuy.com. I invite you to go visit me there. For those of you who have been celebrating, I really do hope that you had meaningful, joyful, and spiritual holidays. For those of you who weren't, I hope that every day is joyful, meaningful, and spiritual, and I will look forward to seeing all of you next time on Torah Tech Tips. Bye. See you later, brother.